Breakfast at Tiffany's, based on a novel by Truman Capote, starring Audrey Hepburn in what became perhaps her most recognizable role of all time. She plays Holly Golightly, a young woman living alone in New York City, basically from one party to another. She makes what little money she has by being a call girl, sees various men, parties a lot, drinks even more. But underneath all this glamour and jazz, there seems to be no actual direction in her life. We meet Holly through the eyes of Paul Varjak, a new tenant who moves into an apartment above her. He's an aspiring writer, and like her, he's dependent on others to survive. He seems to be sponsored by an older rich lady with whom he's having an affair. The two people quickly develop chemistry with one another and become good friends with obviously hopes for something more. But the central question is whether Holly's past will stand in the way of their romance, and even if not, will she not sabotage it herself because of her character? So, first things first, I think that there's a solid reason why Hepburn is remembered for this role in particular, and it's because she gives an absolutely powerhouse performance. She's really bringing to life this complicated girl who, on the one hand, lets life take care of itself and doesn't plan ahead and is this free spirit, but on the other is deeply flawed, scared to take responsibility, afraid of making any moves, content in her chaotic lifestyle. She's someone you can, on the one hand, you can truly get to love, but there are also elements of her that turn you away, and I think that's what makes her so believable and fleshed out. Then there's the chemistry between the two leads, Hepburn and George Peppard, which is equally excellent and makes the central romance feel genuine and real. And yet, for a movie that's a romance about these two flawed, slightly broken characters, it's surprisingly lighthearted and funny. It's a staple, well, romantic comedy. It's very romantic, and there is a lot of comedy that works. It's the perfect representative of the genre, I think. And the comedy works, and it works using using a lot of different tools. The main ones being funny dialogue, snappy banter between the leads, but also between the secondary characters, and visual gags as well, particularly during the long party sequence at Holly's apartment. The whole scene is chock full of various humorous little things that you can pick up on that are happening sort of in the background almost, and it's superbly constructed as a whole. There's also another facet to the humor which I didn't enjoy, but I'll get to that in a moment. Because I first wanted to talk about one other thing that I did appreciate, which was the production design and its attention to detail. Costumes are one thing, and the Hepburn look with the black dress has certainly become iconic. But actually, if you pay attention, Holly only wears a couple of dresses over the course of the film, just slightly changing accessories every time to create several distinct looks using the same piece of clothing, which is very much in line with a character who doesn't have a lot of money and therefore possessions. And then there are the sets and the furniture, and here I also have a brilliant example of the attention to detail. In Holly's living room, there's this couch that, if you look closely, turns out to actually be a bathtub sawed in half. There's still pipes coming off the side of it. And there's even more. In the final act of the film, when we see the apartment that has been somewhat refurbished after some time has passed, that same bathtub has now been moved under the wall mirror and has become a shelf of sorts. Just terrific stuff. Now, as much as I enjoyed the film as a whole, there were two things that I hated, and I wanted to discuss them now. The first one I already started mentioning during the humor part. There is a character in the film called Mr. Yuniyoshi, who is this annoying Japanese neighbor of Holly. The character is meant to be pure comic relief, and it's basically the most exaggerated, blown up Asian stereotype that you could possibly concoct. And here's the wildest part. He's being played by a white dude named Mickey Rooney, who has this really weird makeup to make his eyes look slightly narrower and even a set of huge fake teeth. I mean, what the hell is up with that? It is so tone deaf and just outrageous. It's difficult to believe how bad it is without seeing it for yourself. I have no idea how anyone involved in the movie's production thought it was okay to do this stuff. Apparently, later on, faced with criticism, both the director and the actor admitted that if they could go back and change the casting to an Asian guy, they would do it, that was a bad decision in retrospect. And they've also repeatedly said that they didn't mean to, offend anyone's feelings or be insensitive and only just funny. But hey, I don't think it worked, and it really is one of the most baffling things I've seen on screen, especially considering it's such a ridiculously weird part of an otherwise excellent movie. The second thing that I didn't like is much more personal for me, I'm sure, and has to do with the cat. There is a cat in the film, living with Holly, and it's an excellent cat, very good actor. I think he's the second best performer in the film, right after Hepburn. Deserved an Oscar for supporting role, to be sure. But the things that this poor animal had to go through in this movie are almost heartbreaking. At one point, it's thrown out of a car into the street in the rain. That's not how you treat a wonderful animal like this one. And even Audrey Hepburn has said later on that the scene was the most despicable thing that she's ever done on screen. And remember, this is the key part. This was done before any sort of animal protection standards were established in Hollywood, which means, which makes me doubly worried for the well-being of the cat. I hope it survived just fine, especially because, again, it was a terrific actor. So to round this up somehow, Breakfast at Tiffany is deservedly a classic film. It's a wonderful story about this difficult love between two broken people with a lot of charm, flair, style, and humor. And even with the baffling Mr. Yuniyoshi character, it's still really enjoyable on the whole.